Okay, everybody, thanks for joining us today for Parshas Vayera. And we're going to begin here with Parshas Vayera. You have the link in your chat. You can click it, and thus you'll be able to download the Parsha, the weekly Torah portion. And we're going to go through some parts of this Torah portion, but we're going to unpack what we want to unpack and dissect and discuss and extrapolate, obviously, a lot of teachings from this Torah portion, which deals with Abraham and Sarah, the first Jewish couple. We discussed already in last week's Torah portion about Abraham being introduced to us and God telling him to go to Israel, and then there was a famine, and then he left. And we went through that. We discussed Abraham and Sarah a little bit. We also discussed that they couldn't have children. Now we finally come to chapter, whatever it is over here, chapter 18, verse 1. Julie, you want to read here? Oh, it doesn't have the proper English over here. Hold on. Well, that's not going to help us. Okay, here we go. You see I'm on the share screen. I'm on page 11 of your PDF. So if you open up your PDF, it's on page 11, or you can just read off the screen, which is the share screen, chapter 18, verse 1. This is how we begin with this week's Torah portion. Go ahead. You're muted. You have to unmute yourself. I'm sorry, Julie. You have to unmute yourself, Julie. I'm sorry. Okay, let me begin, Julie. You'll do the next round. On the third day after his circumcision, which was the 15th. Oh, there you go. Go ahead.
Okay. On the third day after circumcision, the 15th of Nisan, 2047, God appeared to Abraham to pay a visit to the sick. This occurred.
Stop right there. So God appeared to Abraham. In the black bold is all it says in the Hebrew, that God appeared to Abraham in the plains of Mamre. This is a location, think like South Central Los Angeles, whatever it is. So in the year 2047, how do we know that? Because if you remember 2 weeks ago, we discussed the time chart of when the world was created, and you added the mathematics of how long Adam lived and how long Noah lived. And when Abraham was born, we discussed that Abraham was born in the year 1948 from creation. It was age of 99 years old. God told him to get a circumcision, because we know at the age of 100, when he and his wife Sarah at the age of 90 gave birth to Isaac. And it was prior to that year when he got a circumcision. So that's why this extra English over here is kind of inserting for us as a little cheat sheet, which would let us know how old Abraham was, 99 years old. Remember, he was born in 1948, and now this is the year 2047. So continue, next verse. This occurred, continue.
Let's see. This occurred in the plains of Mamre. God revealed himself to Abraham in Mamre's territory as a reward to him for having advised Abraham to follow God's commandment to circumcise himself.
So stop right there. What's the point of stating where God and Abraham and Abraham were? What's the importance that he appeared to Abraham in the plains of Mamre? Who cares? God appeared to Abraham, and now they're going to have a discussion, which we're going to read about in just a moment. But who cares where they're hanging out, if it's in South Central or in Venice Beach or in Santa Monica? So they're saying it's in the plains of Mamre because it was a reward to Mamre. This is a fellow. This is the name of a person. Call him Johnny, because he was advising and helping Abraham how to circumcise himself. It's quite a big task. It's the first circumcision being done, especially with a 99-year-old. So since Mamre was a God-fearing person, not a Jew, but a God-fearing person, so God rewarded him by stating and inserting in the Torah that he appeared to Abraham in this town. Okay, continue. Let's do another verse or two, Julie. Abraham.
Oh, okay. Abraham was sitting at the entrance of the tent, looking out for travelers to host. The God had made the heat of the day unnaturally intense, so that no one would venture out on the roads, thus giving Abraham a chance to rest and recover.
I stop right there. So you see over here that on the one hand, Abraham really wanted to serve his guests and hang out with guests. If you can just mute yourself, people. Anyone that's unmuted, if you can just mute yourself, or so you can just mute other people. On the one hand, he wanted to serve his guests. This is Abraham who's sick, which is why God appeared to him, right? As Julie read it right away, verse 1, God appeared to Abraham to pay a visit to the sick. Who's the sick? Abraham. He just had a circumcision. It's like a woman that just gave birth. Abraham just had a circumcision. So God is appearing to him. And God made it so hot that day, unnaturally intense, that no one would venture out to bother Abraham to serve guests. So you see over here two amazing things that right away, as an introduction for Jewish values and Jewish principles, we see one of the great traditions is hachnasas archim, is opening up your home for guests. Where do we get this from? From this very verse, because Abraham's hanging out even when he's sick, and he's trying to do a mitzvah of having people come inside so he can serve them. And we'll see soon that's indeed what happens. So when you want to talk about Jewish values of opening up your home and servicing people, letting people come over for a glass of water or for a lunch or a breakfast or to sleep over, this was a very special thing. This is a Jewish principle and a Jewish value. Another thing we see is visiting the sick. If God could take time from his busy day to visit Abraham from visiting Abraham who was sick, how much more so us today? And we have many Jewish organizations today which deal with visiting people in hospitals. This is, again, a very large Jewish value. And it's actually one of the mitzvahs to go and visit the sick. Sylvia, if you can continue reading. Where my mouse is on the page, Abraham started to stand up.
Okay. Abraham started to stand up in deference to God's presence, but God said, "You remain seated and I will stand. You will thus serve as a precedent for your descendants. Even though I will manifest my presence at every court case, I will not require all those present to stand in respect. The judges may remain seated."
Okay, this is some extra nuanced traditions that we learn, but the point is that Abraham wanted to stand up, of course, because in front of God's presence, right? You stand up in front of a president, you stand up in front of a Rebbe, and God said, no, I'll handle this. Okay, now we're on page 12. So on page 12, you see this is the Hebrew side, and now we're going to move on to page 13, where we're going to get the English side. Okay, if you can reading verse 2, Sylvia, from the top of page 13. God intended
to send 3 angels to Abraham, each with a separate mission, after visiting him. When he noted that Abraham was disappointed by the absence of guests, he sent these angels in the guise of mortal men for Abraham to host. Although they were not really mortals, the Torah calls them men rather than angels in order to A, contrast their limited powers with God's omnipotence, and B, to indicate that even had they revealed themselves to Abraham as angels, he would have been just as unfazed as if they had indeed been mortals, since he was accustomed to visits from angels.
Okay, so we have 3 angels that are ready to come down to planet Earth because they got work to do. And we'll discuss this in a minute. One of the angels is going to turn over Sodom and Gomorrah, Sodom and Gomorrah. One of the angels is going to tell Isaac and Sarah they're going to have a child in a year. And the other angel was to save Lot, Abraham's family, from the destruction. So he could have just sent those angels and let them just do their jobs. But because he saw Abraham so distressed that no one was coming to visit Abraham. And Abraham was so distressed that he couldn't do the mitzvah of servicing guests. God said, you know what? Before I send these 3 angels to do their missions, I'll send them first to Abraham. They'll have dinner together, and then they'll go about their way. But because he sent them to Abraham, he couldn't send them as regular angels with wings and this and that. See, he sent them as regular mortal men. And we'll see maybe a little bit later, I don't know if it's discussed here, Abraham's somewhat suspicious. Are these real people or are they angels? In any event, Stephen, if you can continue reading. While Abraham was changing his bandages. Stephen, are you there?
Sorry, I was on mute. Okay.
Yeah, no problem.
Okay, now I have to get back to the thing.
So we're on page 13, second paragraph. While Abraham was changing his bandages.
No, because once I switch, I'm now off this because I'm now on. I left it to the screen. It was to go back to the control of whether it's on mute or not. Now I have to get back to it. Okay, here we go. Page
13.
Okay, and now it's
the PDF.
Yeah, I know it's.
Yeah.
I'm on. There we go. Okay. Page 13. When Abraham was
second paragraph. Yeah.
He looked up and behold, 3 men were standing before him. He took note that they hesitated to approach him because he was in obvious discomfort. Therefore, after asking God to wait while he attended them, he ran towards them from the entrance of the tent and prostrated himself on the ground.
So stop right there. So you see over here that attending to guests is even more valuable and even greater than speaking face to face to God. Because here you had God was speaking to Abraham and he was hanging and speaking to him. He appeared to God. He appeared to Abraham, right? We said God appeared to Abraham to visit the sick, and they're having a little bit of a dialogue. And then Abraham says, hold on, God, give me a minute. I got to attend to my guests. I'll get back to you. And indeed, Abraham will get back to God. But you see over here the value and the importance of servicing guests. Continue. In accordance with the proper etiquette, continue.
Abraham addressed his invitation to the group's leader in the singular, but in order not to slight the other 2, he first said to all 3, my masters, and only then proceeded to address the leader. If I found favor in your eyes, please do not pass me, your servant, by.
So Abraham is pleading with these 3 guests, please don't go anywhere. You came in through this desert. You see my tent. I want to take care of you. Continue, Stephen. One more paragraph.
I imagine people who are in a hurry would intentionally avoid going near Abraham's tent so that he wouldn't ask them to wait. Anyway, Abraham.
Right. Yeah. Good.
These wayfarers were pagans who worshipped the dirt of their feet. As he did not want an object of idolatry in his home, he said to them, let a little water be brought, wash your feet and recline under the tree.
So stop right there. So the black bold is what it says in the Torah, that Abraham said, let a little water be brought and wash your feet and recline under the tree. These small 2 lines over here, right, which is not in bold, is Rashi. So Rashi says, why does Abraham say we should bring water and they should wash their feet? Just tell them, come inside and have a nice slice of cake. What's his business of washing your feet? So Rashi explains, because Abraham thought these were not angels. These were regular pagans who were sunk and did idol worship. And they would bow down to the dirt on their feet and the dirt around them. And he didn't want idol worship dirt in his house. So he tells these pagans, these angels, wash your feet, and then you can come inside the house and we'll have dinner together. I'm just saying, this is how the commentary is throwing these extra 2 lines. It's not just that, he's bored and adding extra words to our page here. He's actually taking the information from Rashi. And again, how did Rashi come up with this? Is because the way I just explained it. What's the point of this washing your feet business? And again, Rashi is not just someone that is just taking it because he's waking up one morning. It's because he's basing enough discussions of the Talmud. Yeah, you had a question, Stephen?
You said dirt.
Yeah,
I think it's sand, because weren't they in the desert?
Yeah, they're in the desert. Yeah.
So it would be sand, not dirt.
Yeah, it was a little wet and rainy that day. Who knows? Okay. Anyways, the next page over here, we're just going to skip. I'm going over this page 15. This discusses what Abraham served. Of course, there's a lot of commentary. Why did Abraham discuss want to serve this and not that? Why not pizza? But he serves this. Let's continue. The angels are hanging out with him. They're asking about his wife Sarah. Abraham's there discussing. Sarah's inside the inner chambers. Again, more discussions, and they tell Abraham that next year you'll have a child. Sarah was listening. Look at my mouse, and Sarah was listening to the entrance of the tent behind him. Now, Abraham and Sarah were already old and had lived out their natural spans all their lives. They deeply internalized their experiences. Sarah had ceased having a woman's cycle. She was already post-menopause. She therefore did not believe that the angel's words would come true. She laughed at herself, saying, now that I'm withered, shall my skin become smooth? And on and on. This is that discussion, that dialogue between the angels and Abraham. Sarah's over listening. Hearing God's accusation, Sarah denied it and said, I did not laugh, for she was afraid. But he said to her, Abraham said to her, no, you did laugh. You did laugh, Sarah. You didn't have belief. And this and that. And of course, there's discussions there as well. Sarah was already such a prophetess. She was such a, what's laughing? Not for now. But in any case, a little bit later, a year later, she indeed had a child. And she names him Yitzchak. Why Yitzchak? Isaac? Because Yitzchak means laugh. My father's name was Shlomo Yitzchak. Yitzchak. Yitzchak means laugh. Why laugh? Because Sarah laughed. Okay. Larry, how's your reading here on the screen? You want to do page 19? God said. Or Shira. I don't know if you guys can do this. And try to unmute yourself first.
There we go. Where it said God said, the beginning, the top of the page.
Verse 17. Go ahead. Page 19. You got it. God said.
God said, shall I hide from Abraham what I am about to do to the inhabitants of the cities of the plain? They're part of the land that I promised him, so I should inform him of my plans. Furthermore, I've made them their father. Shall I destroy the children without telling the father?
Again, he's sending the angel to turn over Sodom and Gomorrah. So God tells himself, should I have such a destruction happen? Turn over the whole Sodom and Gomorrah and not tell Abraham what I'm about to do. Continue, verse 18.
How can I keep my plans secret from him, seeing that I love Abraham so much that I've promised him that he will surely become a great and mighty nation, and through him all the nations of the world will be blessed. I promised him these blessings, for I cherish him, and I cherish him because he instructs his children and his household after him to keep God's ways by acting with righteousness and justice, so that they will earn my blessings. In fact, when he instructs them to follow my teachings, he adds explicitly, so God will be able to bring about for Abraham everything he said concerning him.
You're doing amazing reading, so let's continue. I'm going to page 21. I'm just scrolling down. Continue. Go ahead.
So as he said he would, God said to Abraham, because the outcry from Sodom and Gomorrah has become great, and their sin is very grave, I will descend, as I did before the dispersion, in order to demonstrate that a judge should not render a verdict till first carefully examining the evidence and see if their deeds have matched the outcry that has come before me.
Stop right there. So this is an interesting tradition. God himself will descend and come down to check it out, which means even though the cry came to God, that Sodom and Gomorrah is so immoral, so depraved with values, and horrible things were happening in this town. It made Dubai and Las Vegas look like a Jerusalem. So God decided to destroy this place. But I will descend, I will come down to check it out myself, so to speak, with my own eyes. So from here we learn that a judge cannot pass verdict. Today actually, judges in courts in America will send many times a jury to the crime scene so that they can see it themselves. Maybe the judge goes, maybe the judge doesn't. But in any case, in Jewish law, you have to actually go down there to check things out and not just rely on audios or videos. Continue with the bold. I will annihilate them. Continue.
Okay. I will annihilate them. If not, then I will know what less severe punishment to impose on them.
Continue.
But Abraham, go ahead. Can I stop?
No, continue. You're doing great. Continue.
Okay. But Abraham knew full well that the inhabitants of the cities of the plain were corrupt. The men he was escorting turned from the place to which Abraham had accompanied them and headed toward Sodom, while Abraham was still standing before God, listening to his words. Abraham understood that these men were on their way to destroy Sodom. He figuratively came forward, i.e., prepared himself emotionally to confront God, to argue sternly with him, to appease him, and to pray to him. Seeing that there was very little time left, he began by arguing with God and said, "Would you in your anger blot out the righteous along with the wicked?"
So stop right there. So Abraham is telling God, I agree. Sodom and Gomorrah is a horrible city. The terrible values that they have there and terrible missions and organizations they have there. Way worse than what the so-called human rights people are doing in Harvard and in Yale. But will I punish the righteous along with the wicked? There are, of course, many wonderful students in universities still. I can't do collective punishment and close down the universities or destroy the universities. This is what Abraham is correctly saying to God. Let's continue. You are reading so well. Continue, please. Page 23.
Sure. There were 5 cities in this plain. What if there were 50 righteous people in the city of Sodom and its 4 neighboring cities? 10 people constitute a communal entity. Their collective merit should suffice for you to redeem 1 city. The collective merit of 5 such groups should suffice to redeem all 5 cities. But even if their merit is not sufficient to redeem the rest of the people, what about the righteous individuals themselves? Would you still wipe out the place and not spare it for the sake of the 50 righteous people that are within it? When the angels perceived that Abraham was pleading the case of the cities for the plain, they began to walk at a slower pace in order to give him more time to plead his case.
Now, why is there 2 angels here, plural? Because one is to destroy Sodom and Gomorrah, and one is to save Lot, Abraham's nephew, and the family. No angel can do 2 different missions. Just letting you know. The third angel already left back home, so to speak. He already told Abraham and Sarah about next year I will have a child. Okay, verse 25, continue. Abraham
then began to appease God, saying, "Furthermore, it would be sacrilegious for you to do such a thing, to bring death upon the righteous along with the wicked, so that the righteous and the wicked fare alike. It would look like
just skip the few line before the next bolts. Abraham answered, no.
Okay.
That would also be sacrilegious to you.
No, that would also be sacrilegious to you. You do not need to justify your actions to any creature, neither in this world nor in the afterlife, when our perspective will be broader than it is in this life. Notwithstanding, in this case, do you mean to punish the righteous along with the wicked? Shall the judge of the whole world not judge fairly?" God said,
continue.
Go ahead.
Okay.
God
no, you're
said,
doing great. I just want you to finish this dialogue. Continue.
Okay. God said, "I will not hesitate to destroy a city, even though doing so will bring about the deaths of the righteous individuals who also live there. This is not being unjust. Their failure to sway the others away from their wicked behavior proves that their righteousness is only partial. They are just thus implicated in the wrongdoing of the majority. However, I agree to recognize the collective merit of 10 righteous individuals, as you have requested. Therefore, if I find in Sodom and its 4 neighboring cities 50 righteous people within them, I will spare the entire area for their sake." So God examined the inhabitants of the 5 cities, but did not find 50 righteous people among them.
And that was 10 for each city, because it was like 5 different neighborhoods in Sodom and Gomorrah. Continue 27.
Okay. So Abraham responded and said, this time couching his request in the form of a prayer, "I have begun to speak to my Lord on behalf of these people, because I myself have enjoyed your beneficent mercy. I would have been reduced to dust by the alliance of kings and to ashes by Nimrod were it not for you."
So he's being very humble, Abraham, right now, the way he's arguing. Let's continue the dialogue. Page 25, verse 28.
Okay. What if there were 5 missing from the city, 50 righteous people? That would still leave 9 for each city, and you could count yourself as the 10th. Would you destroy the entire city and its 4 neighboring cities because of the lack of 5 people? And he replied, "I will not."
Stop. Let's just continue to the end. And he said, where my mouse is, verse 32. Go ahead. And he said,
"I will not destroy it for the sake of the 10. But 10 righteous people living in the cities could not be found either. Abraham then asked God to save 1 city for the sake of 9 righteous people, counting God as the 10th. God agreed, but 9 righteous people could not be found either. Abraham did not ask God to save a city for the sake of 8 righteous people, knowing that Noah, his sons and their wives, had totaled 8 righteous people, and yet their combined merit was not sufficient to save their generation. So Abraham stopped pleading on their behalf.
And basically the narrative continues. Abraham went back to his place and God sent the angel, and indeed that's what happened. So this is always an interesting discussion especially now. Actually, it was this Torah portion this week was really getting to me, with everything going on now, whether it's the innocent lives in Gaza or whether it's the innocent students in university, um, or my children being in a classroom and the teacher punishes all the students because he couldn't find out which 14-year-old child was making noise in the classroom, and no one admitted, so everyone got punished. Collective punishment. So this idea of collective punishment obviously is on many different scales, obviously. But what's interesting to note is Abraham his case was, his arguing case was that God shouldn't punish Sodom and Gomorrah because there could be righteous people living, there could be innocent lives. And once he couldn't find enough innocent lives, even 10 innocent lives in a place of, let's say, 1 million people, so Abraham sort of walked away. What's interesting here is that Abraham didn't argue like Moses did, which is Abraham never once said, you know what, you're right, they're wicked, they're not innocent, but is there any way we can spare them because it's not their fault? Their parents taught them that. They were influenced by a horrible environment. We don't see that even once of Moses making that defense. I actually recently read up on a case of an individual that I know, and he did something illegal, and he was guilty for doing that crime, and he got a year in prison. And they did not argue, the defense, that what this client did was illegal, because they knew it was illegal. They didn't try to say it was legal or that he's innocent. They said it's illegal, Your Honor. But the defendant was sexually abused as a child, and he had trauma, and he never had therapy, and all the dots and all the trauma and everything else in the hell that happened in his life. And therefore, he should be innocent based on that. And indeed, instead of him getting 3 years, he got like 12 months. And 12 months, as we know, serving good time, you got 6 months. You know, when you plead guilty. So Abraham never said, you know, they're guilty, but let's try to make an arrangement, or let's try to teach them new ways. Moses, however, after the sin of the golden calf, 2 million Jews sinned. These were 2 million Jews that experienced the Egyptians being smitten through the 10 plagues. They saw the miracles. These are millions of Jews that were enjoying the manna coming from the heavens every single day. These were Jews who saw Moses split the Red Sea, and they themselves walked through the Red Sea. These are the Jews that saw the Egyptian enemy sunk on the bottom of the Red Sea because the water went over them. And these are the same Jews that worshiped the golden calf. And when God rightfully said, let's wipe out the Jewish nation, what did Moses say? He didn't say, well, there's a few thousand innocent Jews that didn't worship the golden calf. And that would have been a fine claim, because the whole tribe of Levites, we know, did not worship the golden calf. What did Moses say? Moses said, you know what, I'm sorry that they sinned, you're right. But if you wipe out the Jewish people, you can wipe me out as well. This was Moses sticking with his people. Of course, we have to ask, why on earth did these Jews who sought such miracles worship the golden calf? But that's not our discussion today. Our discussion is that Moses went to bat for people who were guilty as charged. He didn't say, but there's 20,000 Levites who are tzaddikim and righteous people. That was Abraham's claim. Abraham said, maybe there's 50 righteous people, maybe there's 10 righteous people. And even after Abraham was told there's not 10 righteous people, he walked away. He said, God, you're right. And that is why Abraham was indeed a special person. He was the first Jewish guy. And his wife Sarah wasn't a great woman, the first Jewish woman. They're the first Jewish couple. And as we explained, they were so special as being the first Jewish couple. Why? I said on one foot, what does Judaism bring? If someone asks you, what does Judaism bring to the table? It's one word: monotheism. They brought to the world the idea of believing in one God. That's what the Jewish people brought to the table. And the fact that Abraham was visiting, had his door open to help guests, the angels, is all part of a practice and offshoots of believing in one God. So Abraham and Sarah were amazing people, and they made their environment good. They converted people, thousands of converts. But why they weren't a Moses, why Abraham wasn't a Moses, was because he didn't go to bat for people who were guilty as charged. Only a Moses, only a real leader leads his people, and even when his people and his flock are not doing well, and they're succumbing to the temptations of their environment, a true leader still goes after such people and still wants their flock to remain, does not abandon the ship. The captain does not abandon the ship. Now, just to make it a little bit less of a jab on Abraham, we can say that in Moses' case, he was going to bat for Jews. Who is Abraham going to bat for? Not only are they wicked, but they're also not his family. They're not his people. So again, we don't really blame Abraham and Sarah. But on the other hand, I just need to point out this idea that to be a leader, you have to be willing to give everything up for your child. And that's what Moses did. We don't really see such a scenario with Abraham and Sarah, who are willing to give up everything for their child. They're willing to sacrifice their son Isaac, which we'll get to which we're not going to get to tonight, but that's a special feature, which is a feature of the Jewish people, that we are prepared to go on self-sacrifice to have our relationship with God. And that's what makes Abraham and Sarah special. And that's what makes them the first Jew, because they're ready to go on self-sacrifice the same way 300,000 Israeli soldiers are in uniform on the Gaza border. They all know that this may be their last day on planet Earth. They all know anyone going past the fence, they know that they may not come back. Not only do they know that, but their parents who agreed to send them to the border know that as well. So that's called self-sacrifice, which is a trait that we inherited from Abraham and Sarah. Moses was unique as a leader because of that episode that I was telling you about. I just want to share one more thing before we conclude this class, and that is Ishmael and Isaac. Ishmael was already born. When Abraham got the circumcision, when God appeared to Abraham, right, said, visit the sick, not only was he sick with the circumcision, but also his son Ishmael, again, the founder of Islam. He was 13 years old. But this son Ishmael was the son of Hagar, not of Abraham's wife, but of Abraham's concubine, Hagar, the second wife. And that's why Abraham was distressed, because Sarah was distressed because she didn't have a child. And indeed, a few years later, Sarah gives birth, and his name is Isaac, as we explained. And then Isaac has a bris, a circumcision. And that circumcision, as we know, happens at the age of 8 days old. So one can ask, who's the greater warrior? Who's the greater child? Ishmael, who had a bris at the age of 13 years old, or Isaac, who had a bris at the age 8 days old? Who is more subservient to God? Who is the greater? Who's the greater person here? Seemingly, it seems like Ishmael. Because not only is he conscious, not only is he healthy, not only is he 13 years old, and he theoretically can make his own decision, as for he certainly knows how to say no, and he said yes, whereas a baby doesn't know what's coming and going. So this is important to note, that Isaac, who had a bris and joined the covenant of God at the age of 8 days old, is a special feature that exists all the way today with all men and women. Because Ishmael's relationship with God and agreeing to have this covenant with God is based on his rationale, on his reasoning. He's 13. His parents said this is a very good thing to do. Ishmael, who's a believer in God, who was educated properly from Abraham and Sarah, agrees, you know what, God asked me to get a bris, so I'm going to get a bris because I want to have a relationship with God, and it makes sense. So that's a beautiful relationship to have. But then there's the Jewish relationship with God, is that in addition to doing things because it makes sense and because I want to do it, you have a relationship with God. It's called beyond our rationale. We do things sometimes even when it doesn't make sense. Even things that seemingly, you know, why do we do that? Like, why do we keep kosher? It's not necessarily healthier, but you still keep kosher. Or why do I have a mezuzah on my front door? I'd rather have an ADT sign and things like that, or you definitely should have both. And other things that may not make sense in our tradition, but if we do it because we do it even though it doesn't make sense, it's beyond our understanding, rather, I should say. I give kosher as a perfect example. We do it even though it doesn't make sense. It's beyond our understanding. There must be some reason to it, but it's beyond our understanding. And we still do it. That is a beautiful relationship to have with God. So you can say, why? I'd rather do things when I understand it. God, give me a brain. I should do things if I understand it. And the answer is because if I have a relationship with God and I worship God only because I understand things, only because it makes sense to me, so then it's considered you're worshiping yourself. Only if I understand it, then I do it. And if you don't understand it, then you're not going to do it, which means you're just worshiping your own brain, your own intellect. But if you have a relationship with God and you do things even though you don't understand it, because you can appreciate that there are things beyond my understanding, so now you're worshiping a God that you don't understand, that you can understand and say, he's beyond my understanding. And that's a God that I want to worship. I don't want to worship a God that I understand. Then I'll worship Bob Dylan or Elvis. But to worship something that is beyond my understanding, that's a God that I want to worship. So Ishmael, who had a bris at the age of 13, represents the relationship of having a relationship with God based on understanding. But Isaac, however, who had a bris at 8 days old, that is a relationship with God based on beyond my understanding. And since all Jewish people come from Isaac, boys and girls, we are continuing to have this relationship with God based on beyond my understanding. There's something called conditional love and unconditional love. What's greater? Of course, unconditional love is greater. That's why a relationship with your spouse is considered conditional love, because there are things that can cause divorce. So as much as you love your spouse, thankfully till 120, but there are things that can, God forbid, sever that relationship, that marriage. But then there are things like unconditional love for my child, that no matter what my child does or doesn't do, I still have love towards my child. That's called unconditional love, because the relationship and love I have with my child is beyond my understanding. It's beyond just, well, I like him. It's more than that. It's something intrinsic. It's something beyond regular understanding. If a relationship was based on my understanding, then I would pick the best child in the classroom. But I love my child even if he gets C's and D's, and if he's kicked out, even if God forbid he's in prison. It's beyond our regular understanding. It's unconditional love. That's the relationship that Isaac has, being represented of having a bris at the age of 8 days. I will stop there.